Thank you for joining us today. We'll give everyone a couple more minutes to log in. And while we wait, I'll go over a few housekeeping points. I think it's appropriate now. First of all, my name is Ruslana Khatagova. I'm Marketing Manager for the Counseling and Psychotherapy book list at SAGE. I'm delighted to introduce this webinar today. I'm joined by Amber Howard, who is looking after the technical side for us behind the scenes. So the next slide. This webinar is being recorded and it will be available to watch on our SAGE YouTube channel after the event. And you will also receive a link to the recording in the email. Closed captions are available, so do turn this on if they will be useful to you. We switched off the cameras and muted the microphones for all participants except for the speaker, so everyone can enjoy the webinar without any background noise. The chat box will be available throughout the webinar time, and we encourage you to use it to create a lively interaction and discussion during today's session with Christian. Please ensure all comments are polite and respectful when using the chat function. There is also a Q&A feature. Please add your questions for Christian in there. We'll do our best to answer all questions during the session. If any remain unanswered, we'll follow up after the webinar and circulate responses to you. We'll also have some questions submitted in advance, so those will be answered as well. Before we begin, a quick word about SAGE. SAGE is a global academic publisher committed to advancing research and scholarship that drives social change. This year, SAGE celebrates its 60th anniversary. Our counseling and psychotherapy list, established in the late 1980s, has since expanded to include resources for coaching and CBT from the 1990s. Next slide, please. And today, we're delighted to present to you the latest, fully updated, 4th edition of An Introduction to Coaching Skills, a Practical Guide, authored by one of our best-selling experts, Professor Christian van Nieuwerburgh. Drawing on insights developed over more than a decade since the first edition, Christian will explore the essential elements that underpin effective coaching practice. The next slide. If you haven't got a copy of the book yet, you can get 25% discount with the code on screen now. And now, without further ado, it is my pleasure to hand you over to Christian for what promises to be a very inspiring session. Professor Christian van Nieuwerburgh.
Thank you so much, Ruslana. What a lovely introduction. And I have to say right at the beginning, what a pleasure it is to work with SAGE. They're an amazing publisher, really driven by a sense of purpose and mission. And it's lovely to be part of the SAGE family. So thank you so much. Welcome to all of you who are here live. I'm so grateful to you for being here. Ruslana, this feels to me like a little bit of a celebration. And we've been working on this book for over a year. So I'm just so grateful to everyone who is here. I can see from the chat, there's people from all over joining us. And I'm also delighted for anybody watching us, the recording on YouTube. So welcome, everyone. My intention today is to share some of the insights about what leads to effective coaching practice, but also give you a little glimpse into what's different in the 4th edition of An Introduction to Coaching Skills. And as Ruslana said, please use the chat function. I'll be keeping an eye on it as we go. And if there's some questions you'd like me to answer towards the end, just put them in the Q&A, and it gives us a chance to address some of those questions as well. So welcome, everyone. And I'm very much looking forward to our shared interaction. So I have prepared some slides, and those of you who know me will not be surprised that they're hand-drawn slides. So first of all, if any of you who are watching this have a previous edition of an introduction to coaching skills, the first, second, or third, you'll notice that the fourth edition cover is very different. So I'd love to see your comments. If you could just type in the chat, uh, what do you think of the fourth edition cover, and what do you think it signifies? I'd love to see some ideas from you about that. But while people are typing their thoughts in, I just wanted to tell you a little bit about my process as well. Thank you. Yes, we've got great ideas here. The idea of diversity, I love it. Every fingerprint is different. Yes, it is a fingerprint. Yeah, unique, beautiful, isn't it? Creative, fingerprint. I love the idea of legacy is in there, making an impact in a unique way. So we can say to our colleagues at Sage, they've nailed it. That is wonderful. And you know what's really interesting is the starting point for that conversation was nowadays we don't use the traditional keys that we imagine, the one with the handle and the long stem, or the more traditional key, or even car keys. And that's when we were talking about how can we modernize the idea of a key. And this came up because many of us now use our fingerprints to unlock things like our mobile phone or our tablet or things like that. But I love that there was more meaning to that, which is so important for coaching, which is this idea of celebrating uniqueness and understanding each client, each coachee is unique, but also every coach is unique. So thank you for your reflections on that. That's exactly what it's about. And I'm going to let you in on a secret. And I haven't done this already because I wanted to do it when we're here live. So I don't know if you, let me stop sharing for a moment. I like that it also looks like a maze or a puzzle, but really a very creative way. So I want to do something here with you live, which I do every time I get a new edition of this book. And that is, as soon as I get it, I write the number of the next edition. Sorry, Raslana, there's work coming up, maybe. So I'll do it now in your presence, which is I'm writing here fifth edition. And from today, I start making notes. So if I get feedback from readers, get feedback on my LinkedIn page or on my YouTube channel or whatever, I'll start making marks in here. I'll start writing, changing words, making a note to myself that we need to add something or remove something. So here it is, fifth edition. Hopefully, it's not going to be for another 2 years or so. But if there is a fifth edition, you'll know it started right here. So, an invitation to all of you, whether you're live or you're watching the recording, if you do have feedback about how could this book be more helpful to you as a coach, I'd like to hear it. So, kind of the fundamentals, one of the fundamentals that I thought had not changed, but I was wrong, is that the kind of the theory that underpins the book and has underpinned the book for over a decade is there's three elements to effective coaching. And that is a set of skills, and the book is called Introduction to Coaching Skills. But the book actually also covers the framework. And what is that? That's a conversational framework because coaching is a managed conversation. So we need to have a framework. The book includes a couple of frameworks. And very importantly, I've always argued the idea of a way of being is essential. In other words, how do we show up as a human being? And that is an important part of the success of coaching. And the research supports this because the research suggests that if your client believes they have a good relationship with you as a coach, they're more likely to make progress. So those have been the three elements. It underpins this book as well, but there's a fourth element that I talk about. So this is new for the fourth edition. And that is that in some situations, it's a fourth element is the ability to share relevant and strategic information with the client when you're coaching them. And the reason this has emerged is because right now I work in a University of Medicine and Health Sciences. I work at RCSI, University of Medicine and Health Sciences. Um, there we have a program called a Master's in Positive Health Coaching. And if you're coaching somebody about their health and you have expertise that might be helpful to them, that idea of being able to share information strategically during the conversation can also be an important part of effective coaching practice. So that's very new. And so, again, I'm interested if you have comments or questions about that, either put it in the Q&A or just comment in the chat and I'll have a look at it in a moment. Because this has been learning for me as well. Because in the first edition, I was very clear that there should be no sharing of information. But I think as the field has progressed and as I've continued to learn, I've started to understand the importance in some contexts of sharing information. But I want to be clear about something. Coaching is still the most effective intervention that is based on not telling people what to do. So I'm still committed to that idea. We don't tell people what to do. We don't even advise people, but it is possible to share information in a way that keeps the client in the driving seat as always. Great. Laurie, thank you for curious about ICF's viewpoint. Amazing. The ICF have just updated their competencies, and now there is acceptance that sharing information is one of the things that coaches can do. And it's very perceptive of you to notice that. And if you do look at the ICF's new competencies, so what's great about that is I think we as a field, the field of coaching, we're moving together with this. And I do understand why in the early days of the professional associations and in my early edition and all of those amazing coaching books that came before me, there was a very clear expectation that information sharing was not part of coaching because we had to distinguish coaching from other helping conversations. But I think the field has matured enough now that we can be alert to context and to recognize that in some contexts, the sharing of information within the framework of coaching can be effective. So that's great. Exactly. We're all evolving, and it's experienced coaches that are out there as well. It's all of us as a field. Yes, thank you all for noticing. So I wanted to highlight another difference. I will also talk about I can share a few examples. I'm going to say a little bit more about sharing information or not sharing information. But this is an example of a tough decision I had to make. I'm still not sure I've made the right decision. And any nerds out there can look at the different editions to see if I've changed my mind on this a couple of times. But in this fourth edition, I've dropped the word coachee. And it's because the double E at the end of the word coach, it really makes it feel like the person being coached, something's being done to them, like, trainer and trainee, for example. It's the person which something is done to. And the more I've worked in the field of coaching, the more I understand it's a partnership. Nobody is doing something to somebody else, but it's a joint collaborative endeavor. So the only alternative that I could find that seemed to work across the whole book in its current form was client. And I think it's also problematic. So I'm not saying this is the perfect word, but you'll notice that in this edition, I use the word client because that's an important thing for us to remember. And I do think this is part of effective coaching, to whether they're physically paying for the time or not. we need to think of them as they're the client. They're the person that this interaction is intended to support. So that, to be fully client-centered, that's where the term comes from. Thank you. So again, I've had lots of conversations. So I can see in the chat here some really useful reflections, and I really appreciate that. And all I can tell you, I'm not sure which is the right word, but I'm pretty convinced that us taking time to think about, well, which is the word we're using and why are we using that word? That's an important part of effective coaching practice. It's that element of effective reflective practice as well, because what underlines continuing professional growth for coaches for me is effective reflective practice. And by the way, that book also came out and it's also published by Sage this year. There's a book called Your Essential Guide to Effective Reflective Practice, which I wrote with David Love, who, by the way, was my teacher, the person who taught me to become a coach. Now, here's another one. And I hope some of you who know me would say I'm humble, relatively humble. And in the earlier editions, I was uncomfortable with me presenting myself. The question that comes here, what is a replacement of coachee? You know, I've used client in this book, but in another book I wrote, I actually used the term learner, which I also thought about. I thought, is that an appropriate term? But in our field of coaching, it's not a common term. And I didn't want to confuse readers. But another word we could use for the client, the coachee, maybe is the learner, because they're the lead person who's learning. But some people would argue, they're both learning. So I think that's a interesting debate. But yeah, in the earlier editions, I really wanted to make sure I'm not putting myself forward as an example of the best coach. So, one of the big selling points of this Introduction to Coaching Skills book, right from the first edition, has been providing high quality videos of coaching practice. And again, if you've seen editions 1, 2, and 3, you'll see there's a wide variety of coaches and clients. But in this edition, we've made the decision that I will be the coach. And the reason for that is not because I'm saying, look, here's an expert coaching conversation, but because I wanted to show real coaching practice. And so if you do watch the videos, and we'll put a little link, all the videos are now accessible to anyone. They're on YouTube. So I'll invite you after this, after you watch this, to go and see some of those videos. But none of those coaching sessions are scripted. And in none of the coaching sessions was I trying to demonstrate a particular skill. In fact, I think we did 15 coaching conversations and I recorded all of them, the full sessions, and then we chose very specific examples. So that's what those are. So for the first time, all of the coaching videos are of me coaching someone else. Another difference, fourth edition, and I think it's notable that the third edition was a pre-pandemic edition. So this is the first post-pandemic edition. And one of the things, my whole world has changed. I mean, even now, here I am in a room doing this over Zoom. Pre-pandemic, the assumption in the book was that most people are going to receive coach training in person and that most people are doing coaching in person. But I've turned that on its head now. All of the assumptions in the book is that the people who are learning to become coaches will be coaching online. And so it's just switching it around. Instead of assuming one thing and talking about the other, now I'm assuming most coaching is done virtually. And then there's some commentary about, well, if you're meeting face to face, this is what's different. So that was a big learning point for me. I thought, oh my gosh, the world of coaching has changed in my mind. Just the kind of the way we think about that. And of course, I've changed as well. So now I want to come back to, and again, I thought, is this book, the place for this discussion or not? But I did want readers just to be aware of what we're calling the three stances of helping conversations. And I just wanted to talk about these stances. Now, I'm going to use the example. Somebody asked for an example there. So I do want to use an example of in a health context. And that's another thing. There's been a huge surge in health coaching. And as I mentioned, we have a master's in positive health coaching. And by the way, yesterday I was at a wonderful awards ceremony called the Thinkers 50. And my two amazing colleagues, Margaret Moore and Jeff Hull, they both are people who set up the Institute of Coaching. They've written an amazing leadership book. But Margaret Moore, for example, is one of these people who has been doing an enormous amount of work around health coaching. And so this is an example of where the context is important. If you're a health coach, let's imagine you're a nutrition specialist and you're coaching somebody about their eating habits. This is an example where sharing information can be helpful. But here's three stances of these, how they could play out. There is the stance, which I'm calling the directive stance, where the health professional, the little e there, is expert. In a traditional way of interacting, the health professional would say, "Look, I'm the expert of around nutrition. You're the patient, so I'll tell you what you need to be doing in order to achieve good health or adopt good habits." So that's, I would say, in the health context, I would say that's probably a traditional way of supporting others. And then, I mentioned the early days of coaching. We actually set coaching completely apart from that to say if there's directive interventions there, coaching is the opposite of that. It's the non-directive, it's the completely facilitative. I won't share anything with you. So there's an example. I'm calling that the facilitative stance, where the coach's role is not to share any information, but simply create an ideal environment for learning to take place. But in this example, then, we're positioning the patient as the expert, and the health professional does not share information or expertise. And so, again, it's one expert in the room if you look at it in that way. And this is work I've been developing with my good colleague, friend, and mentor, Dr. Jim Knight. And we've written a chapter called Positive Health Coaching. We're presenting the dialogic stance of coaches. And I'm just saying here that the dialogic stance is appropriate in certain contexts. And what do I mean, certain contexts? In contexts where there is clear, evidence-based or research-informed information that would support people to adopt behaviors that are more helpful. In situations where there are agreed criteria that people want to pursue, then I think the dialogic model is more helpful. So the positive health coaching is a dialogic interaction. And I love this drawing because for me, coaching is all about an interaction between two equals, two people of equal value. And the more I think about that, the more I think, you know what, both people have expertise. The coach, expertise in having these conversations, expertise in developing this kind of psychological safety, expertise in building connection and relationships, and maybe expertise around a particular topic that the client needs to have some information around. But then also acknowledging the patient is the expert. What are they the expert of? They're the expert of their own lives. They're the expert of what motivates them. They're the experts of their context. So that's the idea. E refers to expert. So when we've got the E there, that means who is the expert? Now, the bit that I'm still learning about, so this is probably a fifth edition thing, is that facilitative and dialogic for me aren't completely separate. What I mean by dialogic conversation is that at some point the coach may decide, you know what, I have some information here that may be helpful to share amongst other pieces of information with the client. But that sounds to me facilitative. So I'm not seeing facilitative and dialogic as kind of two separate entities. But there might be times when we stay in the facilitative stance for the whole conversation because the client is the expert, the client knows what they need to do, they don't need any additional information. That's great. But there might be times when we do start facilitative and we get to a point where the client is saying, look, I'm not really sure how to, adopt a better diet, as an example. And then in that moment, if the coach has some research-informed, evidence-based information, they might say, well, if you're asking about it, here are 2 or 3 things that the research or best practice would say, put that on the table, and then it's for the client to decide. Now, the client or the patient. And for me, the term I'm interested in for that last part of the conversation is co-design. Co-design. Design between 2 experts. Imagine that. So great, some good chat going on, and thanks to those of you who are answering some of the questions as well. I really appreciate that. So fourth edition, right? I think I put too much work into this. I think I could have just done a quick read through, update, edit, but I actually it's been over a year and I've poured over every single word to say, is that the word? Is there a better word? Is there a better phrase? Do I need to say that? Can I remove this? There was a very detailed working through. And I got to the skill. Uh, I had presented it previously as summarizing and paraphrasing. And somehow that had never sat very comfortably with me alongside the other skills, which seemed clearer. The other skills were noticing, asking questions, listening. And then we've got seemingly 2, paraphrasing and summarizing. And I thought, is that really the skill? And is it a coaching skill? Or is it a writing skill? Paraphrasing and summarizing are things that mostly is done in writing. So I thought, what is the coaching skill in exactly? What is that skill? And so in the thinking about it, I got to actually the skill is not just summarizing or just paraphrasing. The coaching part of it is that the coach plays back to the client what they're seeing or hearing. So it could be a summary, it could be a paraphrase, but it could also be a comment, it could be an observation, it could be a facial expression. So I want to share a few. These are all playing back. So if my client comes to me and says, I've just realized that this is a confidence issue for me. I could just say, confidence? Confidence? I'm playing back. You've picked out the word confidence. I could just raise my eyebrows curiously after they've said it. This is a confidence issue for me. I'm curious. I want to know more about that. I'm playing back that they said something. But as I say, it could be a summary, it could be paraphrasing, but I've realized that the thing that clients appreciate most is hearing what is the coach picking up? What did the coach hear from what I said? And then playing it back. So another example of playing back is saying, oh, I noticed that when you said that, you were very animated. I noticed that you get very excited when you talk about this thing. You see that the coach is picking up information and just playing it back. So another way of thinking about it is being a bit like a mirror. but it's more than a mirror because a mirror doesn't jump out and tell you something. A mirror is reflecting everything back. But I think a coach picks, what shall I reflect back to the client? And that's what I mean by playing back. So that's a new wording for the same skills, probably of summarizing and paraphrasing. So you'd notice that's new. Some very thoughtful questions here. So I'll just stop for a moment to look at the chat for a moment, if that's okay. And I see there's somebody who's put something in the question and answers. So I'm just having a look. Yeah, the conversation about professional associations, I'll say something about that. Words create worlds. That's a phrase, I think, from David Cooper, famous for his work around appreciative inquiry. And exactly, one of the things in coaching is paying attention to seemingly minor details. Words are important. So you're right to highlight that. And that's what I also mean by playing back, because we can listen and then notice a word. And I would play that back to say, did you say overwhelming? And tell me more about that word. I'm playing back that they've said, oh, sometimes it's overwhelming. Or I might say, I notice as you're saying that, you're a little bit breathless. That's a playing back. I'm giving back information that might be helpful for the client. But noticing words definitely. Um, isn't it nice, learner? Yeah. What we call, as I said already, I don't think we need to pick a particular word, but I do think it's valuable for us as coaches, as people who care about the success and well-being of others, to be thoughtful about the words that we use. And it makes a difference. If you're a health coach, it makes a difference if you call your client, a patient, a coachee, whatever word you use, it has some implications. So I think it's worth us all exploring. Yeah, good quote there. Um, Coaching online, yeah. I have to be honest, I was reluctant, but now I see that the advantages outweigh the disadvantages. And I've engaged in a lot of very successful online coaching conversations with clients who maybe I wouldn't have been able to coach if I had been more narrow in my way of seeing, connection. So, yeah, now switching the role, it's here in the chat, which is why I'm mentioning it. The idea of switching from mentoring to coaching, I think that's what I was trying to identify with this idea of facilitative and dialogic. But I do want, because I don't want to cause misunderstanding. In no circumstances am I saying we should tell the client what to do. For me, the moment we tell the client what to do, it's no longer coaching. There's no telling. And I would say there's not even advising. We're not saying, hey, I think you should do this. But when we come to a point, so let's say you're a career coach and you're working in a university, and the university student says, you know what, I want to go out and I want to work in one of the STEM, like science or technology. I want to work in that field, but they're not aware of the jobs that are out there. It's not saying, well, if you studied this, you should do that, because that's not coaching. But it's saying, well, if you want to work in science and technology or any of those related fields, here are 3 or 4 careers that many people do who have done your degree. So it's putting some options on the table. So that's what I wanted to mention about that. And so in the health context, I'm very clear to say dialogic coaching is not prescriptive. There's no prescription, there's no prescribing. It's still co-designing, it's still learning together, it's still the client having agency and autonomy. That's really what makes coaching powerful. So, yeah, Great. So someone here trained in coaching and motivational interviewing and has done a master's in applied positive psychology and coaching psychology. It's a program that I was involved in for some time. Yeah, I have to say a lot of my thinking about this is informed by the wonderful time that I spend with students, with my clients in organizations, and with other coaches. So I do think this is us working with what is it that works and what are the parameters that we need to set. So I think it's an ongoing conversation. Um, Now, great point about asking questions by nature can make a conversation directive. Absolutely. That's the kind of the nuance where we have to acknowledge every time we ask a question, we're actually directing. But again, I want to split two things out. I think we can direct attention and when I ask a question, I'm kind of directing attention. So, well, this question's directing the conversation to this, or this question's directing it there. But for me, there's a difference between directing the client, right? And that's where the term non-directive comes from. We're not telling the client what to do, we're not directing them. But to some extent, we are directing the conversation. So that's why I'd like to split the words to say, look, one of our roles is to facilitate. And one of the ways we facilitate is to draw attention to certain things. And every time we ask a question, or maybe even when we play back, we are directing attention. But that's our job. That's the role of the coach, is to manage the conversation in such a way that leads to insights for our clients. So I'm glad it looks like there's a lot of um, reflection in the chat about this, which is great. And so wonderful commentary there. Uh, it is great. So somebody attended a positive health summit that happened at the RCSI University of Medicine and Health Sciences, where we talked about this topic. Great point about online coaching. It does make me want to add something about that. Again, I'm going to be very honest with you to say that I did start with a slightly negative view of online coaching, and probably had it not been for the pandemic, I wouldn't be as committed to online coaching as I am now. But I've been on a learning journey myself. And so one is the assumption that you can't have intimacy virtually. I disagree with that. And my personal experience as a coach tells me I've built connections with people who are thousands of miles away. So it is possible. In fact, it might be easier for me to do that because there's less distractions where I am. I'm sitting in front of a screen. I can close all the doors. I can make sure it's quiet. So that's one. The other thing, and I didn't realize this until we were in the midst of it, I thought, you know what, for the first time, as a coach, I'm in my comfortable. This is my comfortable. You can see I love books, but I've got my books around me. It's a safe space. It's a comfortable space. I can guarantee the broadband. I can guarantee that there's electricity here. You know what I mean? I have control. It feels like a safe space to me. And it's possible for my client to be in their similar space. And that wasn't usually the case when you're meeting in a physical location. You're either meeting in my location, your location, or a third location. And it's almost impossible that both the coach and the client will both be in places where they feel they have some control over their environment. So that's one example of maybe it's better. The other is for noticing. People have said, well, you only see this part of but that's kind of an important part to see. Maybe we're getting distracted by what are they doing with their feet, or what's kind of going on or behind them, or so I can see some advantages. So thank you for that comment. We work with a co-reflector and reflector. Yeah, that's a beautiful word. So some great ideas about the language we use. Maybe both are, because one person is the reflector. I love the word reflector. It's really thought, and I'm mentioning it because it's in the chat, but reflector could be somebody who reflects, who thinks, who engages in reflection. But there's also the reflector word of reflecting back. So interesting. A spotlight is great. Again, it's in the chat. I've always had this image in my mind, and this might be helpful for people learning to become coaches. I've always thought that the coaching conversation should be the client feels like the spotlight is on them. Really, it's their time. So when I'm coaching, I have that visual in my mind of a spotlight. And anytime I notice, if I'm the coach, the spotlights come on me and I've started saying something or I've started sharing something, I remind myself, no, coaching is the conversation where the spotlight is on the client. And I would take the spotlight back there. An example of where the spotlight might change is the client says to me, Christian, you have some experience.
I'm not quite sure how to help you with that.
Sorry, that's my Alexa trying to get involved. So I might get involved. They might say, you have more experience. Tell me. That's an example of when they're kind of putting the spotlight on the coach to say, what do you think I should do? And again, I remind myself, well, this is the spotlight should be on the client. So I might say something like, well, there's a few thoughts that have popped in my head. But before we share or talk about those things, I'm more interested in what you think. Or I might say, this session's really about you and you coming up with ideas. I think you've got some great ideas. You see this idea of the spotlight. That was helpful for me anyway, as I was learning. Um, yeah, the skill of noticing about is an important coaching skill. And I do think we need to notice what's happening in the conversation, where the energy is, etc. Some great chat here. Um, yeah, so this is the kind of the pushback I've got when I've worked in the health context is imagine you're saying to a health professional, you can't share what you know, even if it's helpful for the client. It probably goes against the Hippocratic oath that if you're supporting someone and you have information that might be good for their well-being, that you withhold it. So I think the starting assumption, which I think is a great assumption, the starting assumption is the client has all the resources they need. I think we hold on to that. The assumption that the client has all the information they need may not be true in some contexts. In some contexts, yes. In some contexts, maybe by definition, no. And that's when we might, I'm cautious about the word diagnosing, but maybe in discussion with our client, we might decide, in this conversation, I might share a few ideas as well if they're relevant in the context of our conversation. When there's an information gap. Maybe. I'm not sure about this. And this is why this might be more of a fifth edition. We might do something else. But that's what I love about Sage giving me this opportunity to come back to this book every little while, look at it again. And it takes a lot of effort and time and energy by my publisher, by Sage, to do this. But I do appreciate it because the field of coaching has been developing very rapidly, and there's been a growth of research as well. There's more evidence about what works and what doesn't work in coaching. So it doesn't make sense to me that the 2015 edition is still the one that we use today. So great point. That's wonderful. Yeah, great. The spotlight things. Provided the client feels safe, I sometimes ask them to guess. What a beautiful, yeah. If you could guess, or this beautiful question, if you knew the answer, what would it be? Yeah, and exactly. The world is changing, and coaching needs to continue adapting. And of course, we can't not talk about AI. AI is now going to be part of the equation, and I'm excited about that. I think AI will be great in assisting coaches and their clients I'm not convinced that AI will replace coaching, at least not the way that I understand it, because of that, the very human component for me, which is the most important, which I talk about as way of being. And by the way, that kind of supports an initial idea I had. It was probably in the first edition where the chapter about, I'm just going to check this in the new book, but the chapter about way of being was actually called Being Human. And I'm happy to confirm it's still that, chapter 12, Being Human. I haven't added that because of AI. That's always been for me at the heart of coaching. So I think that's the part that, AI is going to invite us, especially people who are in our line of work, to really foreground what is human. It calls on us to ensure that what we're providing is the most human way of interacting with others to support them through change. And I'm not saying AI doesn't have a role, I'm saying the opposite. I think AI has a big role to support coaches and also their clients. So I've got a few more drawings. And by the way, it's not only the drawings that I've done, these photographs are all photographs that I've taken. I just wanted to share a few of them with you. This is a beautiful part of the northern beaches in Sydney. And I used to walk along that when I was working in Sydney. And I've just captured really special places that I've appreciated being. Now, I am conscious of the time, and I also want to allow a little bit of time just in case there's some questions that have been posed. So, but I did want to share this with you because, again, for those of you who've seen previous editions, I wanted to highlight what's new. And one of the things that's new is, for the first time, I've proposed my own conversational framework. And I haven't done it before because I thought there's a lot of frameworks out there already, and the Grow framework is really effective. It's the one I learned. I think it works. So I was thinking, I don't see the need to just change the letters or come up with add a fifth element or something. I thought, that works. And I thought, but I've, again, with the development of coaching and, coaching being so clear, the role of the coach is not to be a problem solver, right? That's not the role of the coach. It's the client. The client has to figure things out. And for me, a framework, any framework like Grow or similar frameworks, they're kind of still coming at it from almost a mechanical, you do this phase, then you do this phase, then you do that phase, then you do, it's a kind of a typical problem-solving model, it sounds like to me. So I thought, is there an alternative? So I still talk about the grow model, I talk about the growth model, but I offer this new framework, and I call it the 4 curiosities. And these aren't questions that a coach would ask the client. That's not what this is about. It's what the coach is curious about. And I think there's only 4 things we need to be curious about. And of course, you can match these to the grow model. I haven't gone to a completely different space, but I'm saying let's think about it differently rather than have I achieved the goal? Do I know what the reality is? The different way is just for us to bring a kind of a sense of curiosity to every coaching conversation. First curiosity is, I wonder what this person wants. And you can reword any of these questions, anything that works for you, but just reminding ourselves that our role is not to analyze, but simply to be curious. I wonder what this person wants. It's important to note, we want to know what they want, not what do they not want. We don't want to know that. That's not the important thing. The important thing is what do they want? So if our client starts off by telling us what they don't want, and many of my clients start off by telling me what they don't want, I would start by acknowledging, listening, appreciating. But then my question is, what do you want? So do you see? My curiosity is, I wonder what this person wants. So if they tell me all the things they don't want, I'm still curious. I'm still Yeah, what do you want? And once the client is clear what they want, then the next stage is, next curiosity, they really want this thing. Next curiosity is, I wonder where they are now in relation to what they want. So that's the next curiosity. If this person really wants that, I wonder where they are now. And then the next stage is, I wonder what's possible. If they really want that and they're here now, I wonder what's possible. But really, the reason for this framework is to keep the coach in a curious mindset rather than a problem-solving mindset. And then finally, what's changed? Right at the end of the conversation, my new curiosity is, I wonder, as a result of this conversation, what's different already? Are they more motivated? Are they engaged? Do they have a plan? Do they feel more confident? I don't know. But those are this idea of the four curiosities. And some of you I know from looking at the chat are experienced coaches. And if you'd like to just experiment with this to see how that lands, that would be great. The professional associations have been mentioned. What's new in the fourth edition is every chapter links to the competencies of these three professional associations, because I know that a lot of coaches, the process of professional accreditation is important. And I didn't want to align myself to one professional association. I have high regard for many professional associations. I've picked these three because I know them relatively well, and they're relatively well known globally. So I've picked three. And this is simply to help the reader, if they do want to pursue accreditation, just so they can make the connection between the chapter that they're reading and the competencies that are going to be assessed. And there's a perfect harmony between all of the skills and the framework and the way of being in the book and all of the competencies of these three professional associations. So, what I just wanted to finish with a very uh, quick drawing that I made of something that hasn't changed at all. And that's, I've always thought of this book, An Introduction to Coaching Skills, as a companion to a person learning to become a coach. So I've drawn the book there with little feet next to the reader. And I still hope that this book acts as a companion to people on their journey to doing amazing things to support other people. So that's not changed. And I'm just so grateful to everybody who supported me with this book project, all my colleagues at Sage, of course. But I think special mention needs to be made of the people you're going to see in the videos. The people that I coached are volunteers. I simply wrote out to some people within my network and I said, I'm working on a fourth edition of my book. We're creating some brand new videos. Would you be willing to be coached and for your videos to be used? And all I was able to offer them was, this is probably going to be helpful for future coaches. And all of them were just so generous with their time and have agreed to be recorded and for people to watch those recordings. So I just wanted to make a special appreciation and acknowledgement of everybody who was involved. And I'm also setting all of you up, because when it comes to the fifth edition, I'll be back. So I love sharing ideas. They're mostly about coaching or positive psychology. And if you wanted to know more, my brand is Coach on a Motorcycle. I've got a website called that. So if you did want to find out a little bit more, there's lots of videos, there's some podcasts, there's quite a lot of free stuff on the website. The book isn't free, but you do get a 25% discount. So I guess that's almost a good thing. And what beach is that? I'm going to have a look privately at sun setting. This was Tenerife, one of my favorite places. It's a beach on Tenerife. I can't remember exactly which one. Do you want Miroslana to look at some of the questions, or how should we do this?
Sorry, we still have 5 minutes and we have 3 questions in the Q&A, and we also have one pre-submitted question. So I don't know how long it will take, but maybe shall we start with the pre-submitted question first?
Sure, whatever you like, Ruslana, please ask.
So one question that we already had before is how to create a positive mindset in a group with fear of change. I think partially you kind of answered on this question throughout the presentation, but maybe you can just elaborate a little bit on that.
You know, I mentioned this event I was at, Thinkers 50 event. I was at literally yesterday, and one of the speakers was the wonderful Amy Edmondson. So I would refer people to Edmondson's work on psychological safety. But what does somebody who's using a coaching approach do? Well, they demonstrate, they find ways to be trustworthy. So I think trustworthiness and then contracting, being clear about parameters and boundaries. Those are the things that we can do in our role as facilitator. But I think the work around psychological safety is so relevant. I'm going to look at Michelle's questions. I do worry about the number of people calling themselves health coaches, but they are not qualified. What are your thoughts? Oh my goodness. Thank you. There's the National Board of Well-being, Wellness and Health Coaches, I think. It's a national board in the United States. So you can become a board certified health coach if you're in the United States. So of course I recommend that kind of work. And I share your concern, Michelle, especially when it comes to health coaches, because we're dealing with potentially very serious matters that can affect well-being. So that's important. And sorry to mention my own university, but a university-based qualification like the Masters in Positive Health Coaching, that's designed for health professionals. So something around that, and you're right to be thoughtful about it. Anna says, what advice? I'm not good with advice, Anna, just to let you know, would you give a healthcare professional who is certified as a coach and would like to move away from the healthcare system? Yeah, that's if you are such a person, you're of such value to the field right now. I do think people who have worked in the health industry are really well placed to engage with health and well-being coaching. There's a new book that's just come out, edited by Jonathan Passmore, Badri Bagaj, and Lindsay Oates. It's called The Health and Well-being Coach's Book or something. So I would recommend that. Dr. Anna Nassif, my colleague at University of East London, she's written a book about health coaching. So Anna, that might be somewhere you might want to just check. Michelle, I am an ILM accredited coach and I work in IT, about to start an AI apprenticeship with the intention of using coaching to help people use AI ethically. So complex, Michelle, because is AI ethical is my question. So there's two steps. We need to make sure any AI we use is ethical, and then we have to ensure, and this hasn't changed. All of the professional associations, every code of ethics of any coach says we have to operate with integrity. We must not do harm. So we must use AI ethically. And for me, one of the things, and this field's moving so fast, right? But step one is if we use AI, we should mention it. So if we've used AI to prepare something, or we're referring to AI for ideas, or if we're referring to our client, I think it's mentioning it. But I'm glad you're doing this work, and there's a lot of interest in AI and coaching right now. I have a concern that people are rushing ahead with this thing. I don't think the AI technology at the moment, I'm not comfortable with the ethics of how information is gathered. And I'm worried that it's going to be like IT companies that are going to rush ahead with some kind of coaching solutions. And so my hope is that whatever emerges is a collaboration between coaches and people who have AI expertise. And I love this idea of co-design, and I love the idea of making sure we're not over-promising, right? So that's, again, code of ethics would say we must not over-promise on the work that we do. So thank you so much. I'm loving all of the engagement here. There's some comments here about ethics in coaching. I really recommend it. It's kind of core to coaching practice. And I want to thank everyone here. Here's the link if you want to buy the book. You don't have to buy the book, but sorry, guys at Sage, but you don't have to buy the book. But it's really a work from the heart, and it's a work from the heart to the coaching profession. So if you find it useful, or you know of people learning to become coaches, and you recommend this book, I'd be really appreciative and grateful. Thank you so much, Ruslana, and thanks so much, Amber. Amber's been in the background despite having flu-like symptoms. So thank you also to Amber for being here and supporting us.
Thank you very much, Christian, for this amazing discussion and very insightful presentation. And unfortunately, this is all we have time for today. And thank you very much for to everyone for participating and asking questions and participating in this discussion in the chat. Yes, so we would like to wish you all a very lovely day. Thank you very much, and until the next time, goodbye now.
Bye.
Bye.